Reverend. And they are also addressed as the Right Honourable, because by convention they're members of the Privy Council. So they do have quite long titles when you have to draft documents for official ceremonies, such as I was doing today. We've got a confirmation of election coming up next week, and I had to remember all the titles to go into the document for Archbishop Stephen. But together the archbishops lead the Church of England, and each of them heads up their own province. So in the province of Canterbury, the southern province, there are 30 dioceses. And in the province of York, we have 12 dioceses. And there's a whole list of roles and powers that they have. I think it's probably worth remembering to start with that they are both diocesan bishops. I don't know if any of you watched the installation of our first female Archbishop of Canterbury a couple of weeks ago. Moira and I were very fortunate to be there. But it was quite interesting to see how she was, they call it installed now. It used to be enthroned, but we use the more modern term and installed now. But Archbishop Sarah was installed in 2 seats on that particular occasion, and that shows the distinction between her 2 roles. So when she was installed in the choir by the Archdeacon of Canterbury, she was installed in the episcopal seat of the Diocese of Canterbury within the choir, and then she was led up to the eastern end of the cathedral and installed in the choir of St Augustine. And that was by the Dean of Canterbury, and the seat of St Augustine indicates her enthronement as primate of all England, which includes the role as spiritual leader of the Anglican Communion. I was looking at my my service order of service earlier today, and it's interesting to note that at that part of the installation service, the Archbishop of Canterbury is blessed by the senior primatial archbishop by length of service. So we had the Most Reverend Albert Chalmer, primate of the Church of the Province of Central Africa, who prayed over at that point, and in fact he prayed in his own language, which was a nice touch. So that part of that ceremony just showed us in practical terms how each archbishop holds 2 roles, the diocesan and the archbishop role. And I thought I'd just try and list everything, or most things that I could think of, that the 2 archbishops do formally. So each one is president of their own province's convocation. So you might not know what a convocation is, but the convocation is the representative assembly of the clergy of their own province. So basically it's the clergy who have been elected or who are there by right to General Synod, and the province in York and the province of Canterbury do meet in their convocations probably more frequently than they used to, where they have to make certain decisions about legal matters that feed into General Synod. So they're both president of their own convocation, and they are then joint presidents of the General Synod. So the Archbishop of Canterbury doesn't technically have precedence there. And when we have General Synod in York, it's the Archbishop of York who gives the presidential address. When we're in Church House in Westminster, it's the Archbishop of Canterbury. So that demonstrates that they are holding that jointly. They are both members of the Archbishop's Council, which is the national executive of the Church of England. They are also both church commissioners, which is the body that has the money in the Church of England, holds the money in the land. And the Board of Governors of the Church Commissioners is chaired by the Archbishop of Canterbury. They are also, as I've already mentioned, they are both Privy Councillors. You might recall following the Queen's death, when the new king was proclaimed, they were there along with the other Privy Councillors at that proclamation. I'm sure you know they're both members of the House of Lords. Within their own province, they are both chief consecrators. So when a new bishop is consecrated, I've got 3 at York Minster next week. It is the Archbishop who's the chief consecrator, who will then be usually assisted by 2 other bishops from their own province. They are also each responsible in their own province and through their vicar general, who is a senior lawyer, for the confirmation of election of diocesan bishops in their province. So again, I've got one of these next week. It's a legal ceremony where the election of a bishop by their own by the cathedral's chapter is confirmed in what is technically a legal court hearing. So they're responsible for that, and they are usually, certainly in York, the Archbishop of York is usually in attendance, but it's done via the Vicar General, the if you like, the chief judge, the chief ecclesiastical judge in the province. They are also both responsible through a judge who's called the Dean of the Archers and the Auditor, a lady called Morag Ellis. Through her, they also deal with appeals in their provincial courts. So the Court of Archers of Canterbury and the Chancery Court of York are the 2 senior courts within each province that deal with things like appeals against faculty matters, faculty cases, CDM appeals, various matters like that. They also exercise metropolitan jurisdiction in their own province. That is a supervisory jurisdiction over the cities and cathedral churches where there are bishoprics. And each bishop in the province has to give an oath of due obedience to their own archbishop. Okay. Through that jurisdiction, they can conduct visitations of the bishops and inferior clergy in their province. However, that is subject to ecclesiastical law elsewhere. So things like the CDM and the EJM will still prevail. So the Archbishop can't decide that they're going to go and discipline a member of clergy outside of the CDM. But they might do a visitation, for example, of a cathedral. I was instructed by one of the bishops in the Northern Province to deal with the visitation of a cathedral in the last few years, where there has to be an inquiry about issues within the cathedral where there's been breaches of the law, for example. They also have the power to present to livings in their province where a diocesan bishop has allowed the living to lapse. So if there's been a vacancy in a benefice and for whatever reason there hasn't been an appointment, eventually it lapses to the Archbishop. That doesn't happen very often at all. And they also have the ability to delegate diocesan episcopal powers in a vacancy in certain circumstances. So, for example, if a diocesan bishop falls ill and is not in a position to carry out an instrument of delegation to another suffragan in that diocese or to another bishop elsewhere, if you like, the power rests with the Archbishop to make that delegation. There's quite specific rules. It has to be the case that the Archbishop is either absent or ill and just unable to make the instrument, and where there's no suffragan in the diocese who holds all those episcopal powers. So that's a list of some of their formal roles. One of the things that's quite interesting and that I come across quite a lot is that they hold disciplinary authority over the bishops in their province, but they don't have jurisdiction in the separate diocese. So they can't intervene in diocesan issues. As provincial registrar, I often get letters from parishioners across the Northern Province complaining about things their bishop has done and expecting Archbishop Stephen through me to get involved, and he doesn't have that power. We have to send things like that back to the diocese. So I hope that's a general overview of what an archbishop is.
So we've got 2 of them.
Yeah.
We have an Archbishop S apostrophe council, which we always have to be careful that we spell it right. But is the Archbishop of Canterbury senior to the Archbishop of York?
Technically, she is. They are of equal and independent position and authority in their own province, so she doesn't have authority in the province of York. They are both subject to the king as their immediate superior, but technically the Archbishop of Canterbury has got primacy over the Archbishop of York, and that's why she's called the primate of all England, and Archbishop Stephen is only the primate of England. And of course, she does have the role in the Anglican Communion, where she is the spiritual leader of the whole Anglican Communion. So yes, technically.
What difference does that make in practice that she's the senior of the two equals, if you see what I mean?
There's one or two ceremonial issues. For example, she takes higher precedence. If there was some sort of ceremony involved, and we're talking about who is senior and who goes where, perhaps in a procession or something, she has precedence next after the royal family and before the Lord Chancellor. The Archbishop of York has precedence over dukes who are not of blood royal, and he goes behind the Lord Chancellor. So in that sort of ceremonial situation, you would see that there were different. And of course, the Archbishop of Canterbury has the privilege of crowning our monarch.
Are there any other powers the Archbishop of Canterbury has that it'd be useful for people to know about?
Yeah, there are some. I mean, I've already mentioned she's head of the Anglican Communion. She has a couple of extra legal powers. So one quite important one that I come across quite a lot is the power to grant special marriage licenses. So that would allow a Church of England marriage ceremony to be conducted anywhere in England without any preliminaries. So this happens most regularly where there is perhaps a deathbed marriage. So one of the parties getting married, it has a very short lifespan of perhaps just a few weeks. Excuse me. And actually in another case I had, the parties to the marriage weren't terminally ill, but their child was, and her wish was to see her parents get married before she died. So circumstances like that, that is granted. That's granted on her behalf, and it's a very fast moving process. You know, as long as somebody meets this sort of criteria, it can be done very quickly, and then the marriage can take place in the hospital or it's at the person's home, something like that. It's also used for marriages in certain places where perhaps there isn't technically a parish and banns can't be read. So, for example, weddings at York Minster. York Minster isn't a parish church, so if a couple can show some form of link to the Minster, then a special marriage licence could be granted for that. So there, just a couple of examples. She also has the power to grant degrees called the Lambeth degree, which we hear of from time to time.
Just one last question then.
Yeah.
When the Pope died, his successor was elected in 2 days. Why did it take so long to appoint the Archbishop of Canterbury?
Yes, I've been asked this all year. The reason is when a pope dies, the Catholics know who the electors are. They know who the electors of the next pope are. Whereas in our situation, the people who are going to elect the next, who are going to decide on who the next Archbishop of Canterbury is going to be, have to be elected or appointed themselves. So there's quite a lengthy process to elect and appoint people onto the CNC, the Crown Nomination Commission. There are people from the Diocese of Canterbury. There are people from the Anglican Communion. There are other bishops on that panel, and they have to be selected, and then they have to meet. And there are several meetings of several hours, possibly a day at a time, where prayerfully and carefully the selection for the next Archbishop has to be made. And then, of course, we've got our fairly lengthy process of goes through the nomination to 10 Downing Street. then the person has to be elected by the College of Canons of Canterbury Cathedral. Then the election has to be confirmed, as we saw in January. I was at that event as well, which was very interesting. And then we have to, and then after confirmation of election, we have to arrange homage, which takes a long time because we have to find space in the King's Diary, and then we go on to the installation, as we saw last month. So yes, it is a longer process, but it's because we have more hoops to go through and a wider category of people who are going to make that selection.
Well, thank you very much, Louise. That's been really interesting. And we'll now close the recording.